21. Let not the opinion of philosophers who say that the soul is essentially a material of the mind and arises only as a result of thinking that out of thought soul grows, and they believe that thoughts create all essence of soul. Of and whether the soul remains after the death of the body depends entirely upon reasonableness of thoughts which soul has acquired, to the extent that when its thoughts are gone, there is absolutely nothing that would allow the soul to survive the body's death. This is different from the opinion of the Torah. Moreover, such a view is totally unacceptable, and every living being who has once had the opportunity to acquire the mind knows and feels that the mind is an acquisition and not the essence of the acquirer. But, as has already been explained, all material of creation created for the first time, i.e., that which that is not inherent in the Creator, whether the material of spiritual or material entities, is no less and no more than a desire to receive, and although we have said that the soul is wholly altruistic desire, it is only through the tikkunim shel levish or hoser, corrections through being dressed in the returning light, acquired by it from the higher worlds, from which she came to us. This clothes is thoroughly explained in the introduction to the wisdom of the Kabbalah, Paras 14, 15, 16, 19. But the essence of what the soul represents is also the desire to receive. Look there and figure it out. And all a difference that we are given to distinguish between two beings is therefore distinguishable solely in their desire itself, for the desire inherent in every creature gives rise to its needs, and those needs produce in him thoughts and judgments precisely to satisfy those needs induced by desire to receive. And just as the desires of the sons of Adam are different in the two men, so are their needs, thoughts, and judgments differ from one another. For example, to whom the desire to receive is inherent, which is confined to the animal passions. Those whose needs, thoughts, and judgments are directed only to the fulfillment of their purely animal desire to the fullest extent, and though they use human reason and knowledge, yet nevertheless, it is enough for a slave to be like his master. Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Brachet, p. 58b. So it is enough for the animal mind, to be mind, which is subordinate to and serves the animal desire. And those whose desire to receive is largely dominated by human passions, such as lust for fame and power over others, which are absent in the animal world, all basic needs, thoughts, and judgments are directed only to do whatever it takes to fulfill this desire of theirs. And in those whose the desire to receive is mainly dominated by the thirst for knowledge, all basic needs, thoughts, and judgment are directed toward the fullest possible fulfillment of this desire. 22. And these three kinds of desire are for the most part inherent in the whole human race, but in each person combines in different quantities, and hence all the differences among men. From the properties of the material, it is possible to draw conclusions also about the properties of spiritual entities according to their spiritual significance. 23. So also the souls of the sons of Adam, who are spiritual essences by virtue of the vestments of or hoser, returning light, which they acquire by them in the higher worlds from which they come, there is nothing but the desire to give pleasure to their Creator, for this desire is what the soul, and its basis, as already stated, Consequently, after it is clothed in the body of man, it gives rise in him needs, thoughts, and judgments for the fullest fulfillment of its altruistic desire. That is, to give a pleasure to her Creator according to the magnitude of that desire in her. 24. And since the basis of the essence of the body is nothing less than the desire to gain for the sake of itself, and all its manifestations and acquisitions fulfill this spoiled desire to receive, originally created only in order to destroy it and get rid of this world in order to come to the situation of the third, that is, to perfection in Gmar Taiken, at the end of correction. Then the body is born mortal, temporal and perishable, it and all its acquisitions with it disappear without a trace, like a shadow. And since the basis of the essence of the soul is nothing other than the altruistic desire, and all its manifestations and acquisitions fulfill this altruistic desire, which already exists and remains in the timeless state of the first, as well as also in the coming state of the third, then, the soul is not at all born mortal or subject to replacement, but it and all its acquisitions live beyond time and exist forever, and there is no disappearance of the soul, does not take place at the time the death of the body, but on the contrary, the disappearance of the corrupted body further strengthens the soul, and then it acquires the ability to ascend upwards, to the Garden of Eden. It is thus thoroughly explained, that whether the soul remains, after the death of the body, is absolutely and completely independent of the thoughts acquired by it, as believe the philosophers, but solely on the fact that being out of time is the basis of the essence of the soul, that is, its immortality is due to, by the fact that altruistic desire is the essence of soul. And the thoughts acquired by the soul are reward, not her essence. 25. And hence the exhaustive solution of our study of the fifth, in which we ask the question, since the body is so spoiled that it does not acquire the soul in all its purity until the body has decayed and turned to ashes, then, if so, why does it return and rises at the resurrection of the dead? Furthermore, of which it was said, by our sages, may the memory of them be blessed, in the future the dead shall be made alive with their vices, lest they say, about the body, it is different, Zohar, Emer, and point 51. And deal with it well, beginning with the very conception of creation, i.e., the first situation, for we said that since this intent was to enjoy his creatures, it inevitably follows that he undoubtedly created a great and utterly extraordinary desire to receive all this sea of grace contained in the intent of creation. For the great pleasure and the great desire to receive coincide and complement each other. One is the same as the other, literally, sprouting on the same stem. Bereshit 41:5. Carefully study what is written above, in paras 6 and 7, and we said there this great desire to receive is all the new, i.e., not pre-existing, material that he created, since he did not need anything at all beyond that in order to fulfill the intent of creation, and the nature of the perfect Creator that he does not create anything superfluous, as he says in the Song of Oneness, in all thy works no thing is forgotten, nor is anything overlooked or prevails over another. We also said there, that this extraordinary desire to receive is completely separated from the system of holiness and given to the system of the worlds of impurity, from which bodies come out, that which nourishes them, and all their acquisitions in this world. Before the attainment by man 13 years of age, so that by practicing the Torah and the commandments he may begin to acquire a holy soul, and thereby feeding from the system of world's holiness to the measure of the greatness of the holy soul acquired him. We also said above that during the 6,000 years given to us to work on Torah and the commandments, this work does not in any way fixes the body, that is, the extraordinary desire to receive that is contained within it, and all of the corrections that we receive through our work are obtained only by the soul, which makes through these corrections the ascent of the higher steps in holiness and purity, namely, these corrections lead to an increased altruistic desire attracted by the soul, and for this reason, the body eventually is ultimately to die, to be buried and decay, since it has not itself received any remedy. Indeed, it is impossible that body should remain. And finally, if the world been deprived of its extraordinary desire to receive, God forbid, the purpose of creation would not be fulfilled, i.e., that is all the great pleasure which he intended for his creatures. The great desire to receive and great pleasure coincide and complement each other, literally, sprout on the same stem. To the extent that the desire to receive pleasure and enjoyment decreases, to the same extent this pleasure and enjoyment of receiving. 26. We have already said that situation 1 entails the absolute necessity of the third situation, which would fully that which is contained in the plan of creation. Of creation, i.e. situation 1, and not at all less, as stated above in v. 15. Therefore situation 1 necessarily entails the resurrection of the dead bodies. That is, their extraordinary desire to receive, having already completed their journey, dead and decayed in situation 2, must rise up and come back to life again in all its extraordinarily great measure, without any limitations, that is, with all the vices that were in it. And then the work begins again to turn this extraordinary desire to receive into its opposite, so that it exists only to the extent necessary for altruistic actions, and from this we have benefited doubly. 1. Then we have where to get all the grace, pleasure and tenderness contained in the intent of creation, by virtue of the fact that we already have a totally extraordinary body with a desire to receive contained in it, which coincides with this pleasure and complements it, literally, sprouts with it on the same stem, Bereshit 41:5, as has already been saying. 2. Since our receiving is just that, it will only occur to the extent necessary to give a pleasure to our Creator, and for such receiving is considered as pure altruism, as discussed above, in N11, so we have also attained in qualitative affinity with the Creator, that is a fusion with Him. This is our qualitative essence in situation 3. Thus situation 1 entails the absolute necessity of the resurrection of the dead. 27. Indeed, the resurrection of the dead can take place other than at the approaching Gmar Tikkun, to the completion of the correction, that is, at the end of the second situation. For after we have been graced with the deprivation our extraordinary desire to receive and have gained exclusively altruistic desire, and after we have been graced with all the wondrous steps of the soul, called Nefesh, Ruach, Nashama, Haya, Yaida, through our work of destroying this desire to receive, for then we have already achieved the greatest perfection, up to the point that it became possible to reanimate the body with all its extraordinary desire to receive. Body no longer harms us, separating us from the Creator, in fusion with whom we are, but on the contrary, we overcome the desire to receive, and giving it an altruistic form, as already stated. And truly this is how we behave with any detailed manifestation of evil from which that we wish to get rid of. First we must eradicate it completely, to the very end, so that nothing remains of it, and then it becomes possible to find it again and manage it, not as evil, but as something neutral. And what's more, without freeing ourselves from it completely, we cannot at all to control it by neutralizing it to the desired extent. 28. This is what our sages said, may the memory of them be blessed, the dead shall be with their vices, and then they will be healed. This means that, as stated above, first resurrected is this very body, namely, the extraordinary desire to receive without any boundaries, i.e., such as it grew under the influence of the Merkavat Alamat Hatameh, the chariot of the worlds of uncleanness, until they have been dignified with even a little bit of to purify it with the Torah and the commandments, and that means with all its depravity. And then we begin a new work in order to bring all this extraordinary desire to receive to a altruistic kind, as already mentioned. And then it is cured, for now, also it has attained qualitative resemblance to the Creator. And they said that the resurrection of the body in this particular form is conditioned so that they do not say, it is different. Explanation. Whatever is said of it that it is not of the same qualitative essence as it was in the design of creation, for there it resides as an extraordinary desire to receive, conceived to receive all the grace in the design of creation, only for it is temporarily given over to clip it, impure desires, and is given to Tahora, pure desire, but in the ultimately, it is forbidden that the body should be other, for if the measure of desire be even as smaller, then it will be like something else entirely and totally unsuitable for receiving all the grace contained in the creation's intent, which it is already receiving there, being in the situation of the first. And figure it out well. 29. Through all of these explanations, we are approached to understanding the answer to question 2 above, i.e., what are we prescribed to do, literally, what is our prescription, in the long chain of being, in which we are small links, in the days of the brief years of our life. And know that our work during the 70 years of our life is divided into 4 parts. Part 1 consists in comprehending the desire to receive, extraordinary and limitless, in the full measure of depravity, under the power of the system of the 4 unclean worlds of the Abya, Asalat, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. For if it were not for in us this depraved desire to receive, we would not be able to correct it at all, for you cannot find anyone to correct what is not in it. And so the measure of desire of receiving, which is given to the body as an inherent property of the source, which gave birth to it is not sufficient, but over and above that, it must be. Chariot to the unclean clippet, unclean forces. For not less than 13 years, that is, the clippet shall have dominion over it, and endow it from their lights. As their lights continue to nurture his desire to receive, for it is enough that desire to receive is satisfied with the help of the clippet, for they do nothing but expand and intensify the needs of the desire to receive. For example, when the body is born, its desire is only 1 unit and no more, but when Sitra Arat satisfies this 1 unit, the desire to receive immediately increases and wants 200 units, and then, when Sitra Arat satisfies those 200 units, this desire instantly increases and wants 400 units. If it is not as overcome with the help of the Torah and the commandments, to purify the desire to receive and turn it into its opposite, altruism, then its desire to receive will continue to increase over the years of his life, until the person dies and half of the unsatisfied desire along with him. This is what counts as his abiding under the dominion of Sitra Akra and Clippet, whose purpose is to expand and nurture his desire to receive and make it extraordinary, and have no boundaries. That is, to furnish man with all the material on which he to work on and to correct. 30. Part 2. From the age of 13 onward, for then the power is given to the point in the heart, man, which is the essence of the Ahareim, the backside, literally, buttocks, of the Nefesh Dikdasha, holy soul, literally, the soul of holiness, clothed in his desire to receive since his birth, but it does not begin to awaken, and happens only after the attainment of 13 years of age, for the reasons stated above, and then he begins to come under the authority of the system of the holiness worlds, that is, to the extent that he is involved in the study of the Torah and the commandments. The main part of what he is instructed to do at this time is to comprehend and nurture the desire to find the spiritual. From the time of his birth he has no other desire to receive except only desire for material things, and therefore, although he before the age of 13 has acquired an extraordinary desire to receive, he has not yet completed the cultivation of this desire to receive, and the main part of the growing desire to receive can only be imagined in the spiritual, since, for example, before the age of 13 desired his desire to receive to consume all wealth and all the honors inherent in this the material world, and it is clear to all that this is for the of the transitory world, which appears to everyone only as a fleeting shadow. There it flashed, and then it was gone. On the contrary, when he acquires an extraordinary spiritual desire to receive, that is when he wishes to absorb for his pleasure all the grace and all the happiness of the eternal world to come, to possess them forever and ever. For the main part of this extraordinary desire to receive is only finally formed as a desire to attain the spiritual. 31. It is written about this in Tikkunim, i.e. Tikkunim Zohar, Tikkunim Hadassim, p. 97b, regarding the verse, the leech has 2 daughters, have. Give and give, Mishlei 30:15, that leech means Gehenna, and sinners, imprisoned in this very Gehenna, shouting like dogs, HAV, that is, give us the riches of this world, give us the riches of the world to come. And yet, this step is immeasurably more important than the first, because in addition to what man truly obtains in full measure the great desire to receive and is given to work the whole material he needs, for this is the step leading him to service, lishma, for the sake of the Torah itself, as our sages used to say, may the memory of them blessed, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate, Sachem, p. 50b. Let one always be engaged in the Torah and the commandments, not even for its own sake, not for the sake of the Torah itself, he comes to, for the sake of the Torah itself. And so this stage, which appeared after the attainment of 13 years of age, is characterized as Kdusha, holiness, and in serving not for the sake of the Torah itself, is the essence of a holy servant girl who serves to her mistress, and not to inherit from her, as it says in Mishlei 30:23, see below. And in the mistress, i.e., serving for the sake of the Torah itself, contains the essence holy Shechina. For the maidservant leads him to service, for the sake of the Torah itself, and he is honored that the Shechina rests upon him. And he is obligated to take all the proper steps to come to serve, for the sake of the Torah itself, for if he does not make an effort to do so and, God forbid, do not come to the service, for the sake of the Torah itself, then he will fall into the jaws of the unclean maidservant, who opposes the handmaid of holiness and wishes to confuse a man by claiming that the service, not for the sake of the Torah itself, will not lead him to service. For the sake of the Torah itself. And of this, it is said, and the handmaid, inheriting his mistress, Mishlei 30:23. For she will not allow a man to approach his mistress, who is the holy Shechina. The last stage of the second part of life's journey consists in the fact that he must love the holy Creator with great passion, like a passionate man who falls in love with all the power of the earthly passion to the point that his passion is always in his sight and never leaves, day or night, and, as the poet said, remembering him, I am sleepless, slitch it for 10 days of repentance. Then it is said of, and the tree of life is the coming of desire. Mishlei 13:12. According to Rashi, fulfilled desire, for the 5 stages of the soul are the essence of the tree of life, since their development spans 500 years. Since each step lasts 100 years. That is to say, this whole period should lead him to the attainment of all these 5 stages of Naranhai, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Heya, Yaida, which are explained in the discussion of Part 3 of his Life's Journey. 32. Part 3 is working on the Torah and the commandments for the sake of the Torah itself, that is, with altruistic motivation, not for the sake of reward. For this work purifies, in a person's desire to receive for its own sake and transforms it into its opposite, altruistic desire, and as he purifies the desire to receive, he becomes fit and ready to acquire the 5 constituent parts of the soul, called Naranhai, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Hea, Yaida, see below, at 42, as they abide in altruistic desire, as already, as discussed in N. 23, and they will not be able to put on his body, as long as the desire to receive has dominion over it, and is opposite to the soul and properties, or, the desire to receive will not be able to clothe itself with its body, so long as the desire to receive is over it, which is opposite to the soul, or is qualitatively different. Hitlabshut, clothes, and Hashvat Hatsura, qualitative identity, coincide and complement each other, literally, sprouting on the same stem, Bereshit, 41, 5, as already mentioned above, at 11. When he is honored, that will be his desire wholly altruistic, and there will be no desire in him at all to satisfy his own needs. He will find that he has been honored qualitative identity with his higher Naranhai, attracted from their source in the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, from the situation of the first through the worlds of Abya, Asalat, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, of holiness, and immediately they will be drawn to it and will be clothed in it, step by step. Part 4 is the work that takes place after the resurrection of the dead, that is, when the desire to receive, having already completely disappeared as a result of death and burial, is revived again, becoming an even more terrible desire, and this is the meaning of the words, "The dead shall be with their vices," see above, in paragraph 28. And then turn this gain into its opposite, altruism, which is described there in detail. But there are chosen few who are given this work when they live in this world. 33, and now we are left to clarify study 6, what are sages, may their memory be blessed, that all the worlds, higher and lower, were not created otherwise than for man's sake. Translation of the corresponding fragment from the book of the Zohar is given here, which, on the face of it, seems very strange that for the sake of a little man who does not even a hair's breadth compared to the reality before us in this world, much less in comparison with the higher spiritual worlds, the Creator must work to create all this for him, and even more strange as to why a man should have these great and numerous spiritual worlds. You should know that all the pleasure of our Creator seeking to bring pleasure to his creatures, he will experience, inasmuch as the creatures perceive that he is the one who bestows and he is the one who delights in them. Then he shall be glad for them with great mirth, as a father rejoices with his son, who has pleased him to the extent that the son feels the majesty and height of his father, and his father shows him all the treasures which he prepared for him. As the verse of the Tanakh says, Yirmiyahu 31:19, is not my son dear to me? Ephraim, is he not a child with whom are they having fun? For with every word I speak of him, I remember him more and more. Therefore my gut is aching for him. I will have mercy on him, saith the Lord. Look closely at this verse, and you will be able to know and understand what great joy the Lord has with those who have reached perfection and have had the privilege of experiencing him and to realize his greatness in all the paths he has prepared for them, to the extent that he will reveal himself to them as a father to his dear son, for a father rejoicing with his son, etc., and all this. is before the eyes of those who know this verse, and it is impossible to go on with this subject any longer. It is enough for us to understand that for the sake of this pleasure and amusement with those who have attained perfection, it cost him to create all the worlds, the higher ones together with the lower ones, as this will become clear to us.